The powerful define the standards of virtue. Such principles of the Telvanni fall upon the faction of Telvanni contracts to maintain and uphold. Visit Heimland Keep and join us today. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Scrollplay, the Elder Scrolls roleplay show. I'm your host, the Human Floyd, as always. Today we're going to look at IC and OOC community news, and we'll have an interview with Space Nikora about political backstabbing and spying in roleplay. Stay tuned. Our top story for this episode comes from the EU Megaserver in the city of Wayrest, where waves of crime have sent ripples throughout the community, conveniently taking place just as some visitors from the Ebonheart Pact have shown up. We'll take a closer look at that later, but first let's jump into the NA news. If you haven't yet, you should really check out the NA Guild community map on TESO-RP, link in the description of course. The ever-vigilant Forest Guard keeps it updated with all the active roleplay guilds. There's a dot for each guild's location, so you can see where all the guilds are. Underneath the map there is a list of all the guilds with links to their websites, so if you're looking for a roleplay guild or you just want to see who's active where, you should definitely check it out. Chaos Killer keeps the individual zone maps updated too, so that is very cool. Definitely check it out, link in the description. In AD news, the growth of the Greymire and the Argonian refugees there has not gone unnoticed by the rest of the Dominion, especially after the Dominion Commemoration Masquerade hosted by Relics, where Battlereeve Telmathian, a high-ranking Dominion commander, was nearly assassinated by an Argonian. The Saxleal was still enraged by the actions of the Dominion in Shadowfen, the inexcusable destruction of his people's eggs, which incited the long-remembered Battle of Canarthi's Roost, where Argonians set fire to Dominion ships while their allies attacked the rest of the Isle. In the wake of these events, the Eyrie, Bramblescar clan, and other groups have shown interest in reaching out to the refugees. Whether or not all of their intentions are good has yet to be seen. Many now wonder if the actions of one will affect the lives of many. For those who don't know, the Battle of Canarthi's Roost was a big roleplay battle between the Ebonheart Pact and Dominion taking place sometime last summer, I think. And it's really cool to see that a big event like this is still affecting roleplay today. I would encourage people to take events that have happened in your character's past and bring them up in character sometimes. It makes the world all that much more real since other people were there too. I'd also encourage people to do more cross-faction roleplay, which you'll see coming up that's actually been happening more than people might realize. No news for Daggerfall NA today. If you are a guild leader or someone that runs events, you should get a hold of @ThronEndgame or send him a message on Engine to tell him about your storylines, current roleplay, all that stuff. In Ebonheart Pact news, Irondale has started a YouTube channel for Skyrim. Children of Skyrim is both a website and an in-character council of leaders from the Frozen North. Irondale has described his show Children of Skyrim Update as Scrollplay for Skyrim, so if you're interested in hearing more about what's going on up there, you should definitely check it out, link in the description. The Ebon Orzamer is an alliance of orc strongholds in Skyrim, made up of orcs who have lived in Skyrim for generations, and those who seek to form a new nation opposed to Orsinium and the oppression of the Daggerfall Covenant. They're already getting involved in the wider Pact roleplay scene and seem like a perfect guild for an orc. In Skyrim, there are whispers of a murderer. A Breton woman named Madeline was said to have shot a guard with a bow and arrow during the Fighters Guild class in Malton. Where she went and what will happen to her, no one knows. But first, she must be found. Whisper at Corwinia to get involved. Sunday the 12th at 9 p.m. EDT is the date set for the wedding of Serethi and Dane, officiated by Iondale Woodrow. It will be a simple ceremony hosted in the northwest of the Vermin Woods near Snapleg Cave. Trollhättan has been overrun by mercenaries, as well as Draugr, and other abominations. If you're interested in DM'd battles against player-controlled enemies, you should whisper at Mallywinks to help the Vigilant retake Trollhättan. Down a bit more south, Morrowind is rocked by the death of Ramus Samaris at the climactic battle between the Ashlanders and Housemer forces. A new Morrowind council will be formed as the houses begin to rebuild after the war. Be sure to listen to the extended interview link coming up after the news for more on that. With the false incarnate Han Lu and Ashkan Zerubbabel dead, the Ashlanders have scattered across Morrowind. 2 new guilds have formed out of the ashes of the Cult of the Nerevarine: Call of Boethia, led by Slayer Serena, and Tangri Valathi, led by Ivoba and Afif. Call of Boethia is a little more xenophobic and more traditional Ashlander, while Tangri Valathi is slightly more open to outsiders, having accepted the help of the Banescale Fellowship. Speaking of Argonians, there will be a city meeting in Stormhold on the 18th at 9 p.m. EDT. All are welcome to come to see what Saxhleel consider worth meeting about. We'll be discussing ambassadors to and from Skyrim, as well as trade agreements and several other issues. In EU news, it looks like the EU community site was taken down. You guys can still use TESO-RP. There is also StormRP for the Daggerfall Covenant and eprp.engine.com for the Ebonheart Pact. Links in the description below. I need a new EU AD news correspondent, so if you're interested in helping out your faction by reporting news and storylines and stuff to me, and then getting them shown here on Scrollplay, you should contact me on Engine or at thehumanfloyd@gmail.com. Aside from the top story coming up in a bit, it looks like Wayrest is abuzz with news of a donkey. Yes, apparently it's a big deal that there's a donkey in the stables. You don't see him every day, and Wayrest is all over that. So I guess go look at the donkey, pet the donkey. It's a thing. For EP News, Birdsong, who we'll be interviewing in the next episode, reports that an unmarked ship recently docked near Windhelm, where its crew unloaded a large number of unmarked sacks from the hold. No one seems to know what was contained in those sacks, but the workers described it as the good stuff, and apparently were saying that it had a high value. The ship itself hasn't been seen since it departed, having only stayed in port for a couple of hours. Neither its cargo nor its passengers have been traced, and the Windhelm Guard is said to be investigating. Could this be related to recent news from Daggerfall lands of a failed bank robbery? The Whitefur Emporium held its grand opening in Windhelm this week, a new venture by the well-known Khajiit trader Tiberius and his partner. The Emporium stocks goods both local and exotic. While it's too early to report on the success of the Whitefur Emporium, it's certainly off to a good start. Tiberius himself has a long and distinguished history of trading in Pact lands, with dealings in all parts of Morrowind and Skyrim. He is perhaps best well known for his deals in Malton, overcoming opposition to all non-Pact races from the town guard at the time. As may be apparent by the news, Windhelm has seen a huge increase in activity of late. It's not clear what the reasons might be, but it seems that Windhelm is now the place to be in Skyrim and all the Ebonheart Pact. The Ebon Drakes have set up their HQ in the city, the Golden Flame has been seen around, and with the Emporium opening, there's a lot to see and do, so go check it out. Our top story for this episode comes from the EU DC news correspondent, Fane. A wave of crime has washed over the capital of the Daggerfall Covenant. Rumors abound of a recent attempt to rob the Wayrest treasury. Although official sources state that the attempt was entirely fouled by the guards, some guards, as well as treasury staff, lost their lives or were injured in the process. One of the robbers was also killed and many were injured, but the robbers managed to escape, only after marking a wall of the treasury with the writing, "Blood for the Pact." At the same time, 4 people were murdered in Wayrest, apparently in isolated assassination attempts. The guards are speaking of a settling of scores between rival criminal gangs. Fortunately, they intervened quickly enough and no innocent civilians were injured. The assassins managed to flee the scene, but one of them, an Argonian male, attracted sufficient enough attention to himself that the witnesses were able to describe him in detail to the guards. An identity has been made, and a reward has been offered for his capture. These events occur while the Golden Flame, a famous group of Daedra hunters headquartered in Skyrim, is currently visiting Stormhaven, attracted by rumors of vampire and werewolf activity. Whether these rumors are true or not is hard to say, but the good citizens of Wayrest have been buying up all garlic and canis root from the market, as a precaution to protect their homes. The Golden Flame's leader, Drokaj, claims that a vampire coven may be behind this crime wave, and that the motto, "Blood for the Pact," may have been made precisely in order to discredit the Golden Flame, and drive them away from Wayrest. As I said, cross-faction roleplay is happening more often than you know. Sounds like there's a lot of cool stuff going on in Wayrest, as always. Link in the description with more information. If you have eyewitness accounts, opinions, anything like that on any of the news you heard today, please post in the comments section below. Let us know your thoughts. We want to hear them. For this episode's interview, we'll continue to look at what it's like to play a villainous character. Space Nikora plays Naris Tanisi, a Telvanni wizard lord. I know what you're thinking, more Dunmer, but who does dark better than the Dark Elves? Plus, any of the information you hear in these interviews can pretty much be applied to any roleplay situation. For example, the Bretons and the Altmer share a lot of political shrewdness that the Dunmer have, so keep that in mind. Let's see what Space has to say. Listen to the extended interview to hear about the current state of Morrowind politics since the death of Ramus Samaris, the relationship between Telnara and Telvanni contracts, and a bit more about metagaming. Welcome to the show, Space Nikora.
Hello.
Alright, so let's just start off by the usual first question. Tell us a little bit about your first roleplay and how you got into the practice.
Now, oh goodness, that's a long time ago. It's about 8 years since I first started role-playing on a small forum for, bizarrely, Command & Conquer, which actually turned into a mess of meta-play and god modding. And I will openly admit I was also a bit of a meta-player and god modder back then as well.
Sure.
So I've come along a long way. I mean, I did a lot of forum RP for the first 5 years of my RP. Oh. So I was doing things like Mass Effect. I began my own, there was like a nation building website that I did, which I spent most of that period on, where it was sort of a lot of my role-playing experience came from. Like, I've always remember one piece from Terry Pratchett where if you're going to build something, you got to make sure that when you leave it, you can still feel like it's running. And I haven't been on this site for years, and I still feel like that creation is still running and there's people still doing these things. And I'm just like, it's all in my head. But my first actual sort of on a multiplayer game roleplay was late 2010 on World of Warcraft, and I had this, it initially started off as this human thief that she was trying to steal these items from this one guy, and he basically turned it on her, told her to sort of get out of the clothes because I'm going to steal them from you, type deal. The guards came along and they didn't side with my character that was basically standing there butt naked, as it were. They sided with this guy that had stolen everything. And basically, like, I sort of sat there and went, oh my God. Somebody has just managed to turn this whole situation against me. And pretty much I was hooked. ever since, and I've been hooked on what's known as spontaneous and random RP ever since.
You play Naris Tanisi, who is the leader of Telvanni Contracts. Tell us a little bit about him, what he's about, maybe a little bit of his backstory, things like that.
Of course, it's best to start with. It's really hard for me to describe Naris, even though I play him. He started off as a spell write. It was like the first week of launch. He's a year old now, and I'm a little surprised at the journey he's come. He started off on a boat, coming in on Davon's watch, drunk. And although he was this spell write, he had nothing. Absolutely nothing. He didn't have any power. He didn't have... Although he had his magical ability and sort of his own experience from Port Telvannis, he didn't really... He had to literally build up all this power. He made a deal with a now defunct guild called Rogar's Heroes to join the Pact to fight with them. And this has always been the critical thing with Naris as a Telvanni. He doesn't fight for the Pact, he fights with them. He's, at the end of the day, using the Ebonheart Pact for his own gain.
So, Telvanni are incredibly powerful wizards, to the point that most player characters, with the exclusion of maybe like a main character from one of the single-player games, would probably not stand a chance against a true Telvanni wizard. How do you factor this into your roleplay, considering the general consensus is everybody is the same power level, so we don't argue about it?
Curiously enough, and this actually was only brought to my attention within the last few hours, actually, before this interview was done, Chiara Telvanni showed me this article done by Season Shadows, or Malfunction, wherein he actually talks about role-playing a mage. He mentions, and I'm just going to generally talk here, where he mentions avoid plot destroying abilities and letting others have the limelight, as it were. But also, it's sort of a meta responsibility to use this magic. I mean, especially with Naris, you rarely actually see him using his full magical potential, because that sort of devalues what the Telvanni are. If you see magic being thrown around, like say, if you summon a fireball, that's really cool, isn't it?
Sure.
Yeah. But if you start throwing it and you keep resummoning it, then it isn't. You sort of just like, oh, I'll just throw a fireball.
Right.
It's like that. I mean, the siege of Heimling Keep that occurred when basically Naris had a blockade of Redderans and Dres Ballistae all pointing at a siege at the then rather weak siege shield of Heimling Keep, Naris actually had to use his mind to get out of that.
Rather than magic.
Yeah, and he actually only cast one spell throughout that whole event. So it's a case of you really, especially when you're a Telvanni, you sort of have to think outside the box. And it's fascinating, because a lot of the Telvanni wizard lords I've seen do that.
Which seems the appropriate way to roleplay a Telvanni too, because they're very well known for being crafty.
Well, I always find there's a rule within, we have these sort of 36 rules of Heimling Keep, as it were, which is basically, I think I heard, it was classic Telvanni jerk mode when I was writing these things, because it's rule number 23, and you can see this on our website, by the way. If you are madder than a Telvanni, there is something wrong in the world. And it's quite true. If we have something absolutely stark raving bonkers on our keep, we do quote that rule. So, absolutely.
In regards to Telvanni jerk mode, since the Telvanni are known for being so subtle and manipulative and generally not very trustworthy, as you said yourself, they're in it for themselves. How do you roleplay something like that without upsetting people out of character? How do you have conflicts with people in character and keep things civil out of character?
I mean, obviously, the way I'm chatting right this second, I'm exceptionally relaxed OOC. I have yet to meet a Telvanni guild leader that has been very uptight. we're just so relaxed about things, and we're just like, yeah, okay, that's cool. But especially in Telvanni contracts, the first thing I did when I established the guild was I set down some rules, ICly, especially about things like manipulation and deception, as it were. And I pointed out to people if they sort of like, well, no, you can't, you should be telling us and communicating things. I say, well, actually, under our rules, we don't have to if we believe there's a case of, say, metaplay. Mm-hmm. And I will say that this metaplay is treated as a very, very serious sort of offence in our guild. It's a case of like investigate it very heavily.
When you're doing so much spy roleplay and stuff like that, there's a lot of chance for there to be some metagaming and people telling you things that they found out of character, in character, and stuff like that. So it sounds like you guys handle that pretty well.
I can honestly say, as the person who does the enforcement, yes, I do. And pretty much I do handle in our guild the enforcement part, because I consider that sort of my role in Telvanni contracts.
Gotcha. So that's almost like a dedicated job for you. That
I wouldn't call it a job per se, because I log off the computer and I go off and do my actual job.
Yeah.
I call it one of the most important roles of a guild leader is you have to keep to your rules and you have to be a role model.
Absolutely.
To your guild members. If people don't see that you're breaking your own rules, it devalues your guild.
Absolutely. Your guild, especially Chiara Telvanni, are known for being collectors of secrets and dealing in information. Is there anything you can tell us about, since obviously you're not doing any metagaming, so you're collecting all of this information in character, is there anything you could tell somebody who might be interested in doing something along those lines, or how you guys go about it?
We did discuss this before amongst our officers, and I do have something I do have to say about this, is Chiara's network is completely handled by Chiara Telvanni. Telvanni Contracts has no actual jurisdiction over how it's run and the methods it employs, other than when a metaplay accusation is thrown up, and if it's backed up by evidence, I have to step in and investigate. And as I said before, every accusation we've had, I haven't seen any grounds to uphold. And at this stage, that network itself, which I would consider is one of the best spy networks ever, but then again, I would say that, is at around triple digits, and we get information from everywhere in the Pact, and probably further. But that being said, back after I resigned from the Grand Council of Morrowind, I actually had an insight into how that network gathers information firsthand on Naris, which was just as simple as being positioned in the correct place, hidden and uncaught. And Chiara did sort of say to me that occasionally these agents would then meet up with Chiara Telvanni in an undisclosed location, and even I do not know where these locations are or the identity of said agents, and I can't reveal them as I've agreed to a non-disclosure on this, where the information is shared ICly. And this has been the critical thing. Every time I go back through it, it has all been handled ICly. And there is this definite line in our spy network where, and I have to credit Seth Bluemoon, who does a fantastic job at managing this, where that line is in place.
Very nice. That's very good to hear. So obviously it's Dunmer roleplay, so it's political. And you said you used to be a member on the Council of Skyrim, or Council of Morrowind, that is. How does political backstabbing and trickery work on an out-of-character level? Is there any sort of OOC coordination going on when you're having political conflicts with other house leaders and things like that?
It's very much, especially on the political scale, Morrowind, and I know very much Morrowind is a point of controversy, as well as Morrowind is like a equivalent of Marmite, which is this one strange, somebody told me what it was called and I can't remember the American term, but it's a type of spread that you either love it or you hate it. And that really to me has been what Morrowind sort of is to the Ebonheart Pact and to the wider community. You either love it or you hate it. And there's like a middle ground where people are like, well, this could be improved, this could be improved, this could be improved, which I'm firmly in. But there is a general understanding that in Morrowind and over a hierarchy like RP settings, and I hope there is, where backstabbing and trickery do happen. And it's a case of how you deal with it. And it's very much like a player versus player on a political RP scale. You know, you sort of have like factions that you side with, and then you sort of have your own sort of keeps. And it's a case of power is very much a definition which differs to different people. Some consider it force, some consider it piety, some consider it information, some consider it magical. And there's this meta game that sort of has developed over the year wherein we're about to enter the Hortator Ramus Amaris is now dead, to put it simply, and the normality is going to be slowly returning to Morrowind. That means the Grand Council will be back, and for those that don't know, there have been a few changes that have been introduced, which include 5 new councillors, and there'll be 2 per house. Now, I do a lot of political analysing, especially at the top, because this changes my overall how I'm going to be positioning our diplomatic stance. And TC has always had a very solid and very stable diplomatic stance on such matters. We change and compromise, but there is a red line. And what we're about to enter is a term that in Britain we saw 5 years ago, and I'm using a real life example, so bear with me, wherein we had a situation where it was called a hung parliament. Britain has never had a hung parliament for about 50, 60 years, excuse my history, maybe longer. But the 3 main parties had to form a coalition. And they had about a month before we went back to the polls. And that's how we got our government this time around. And we're going to have it again, according to predictions, but I won't know until polling day. But it's a term that I've coined called power transition. Whoever, and this will probably get a little bit of controversy, so bear with me, guys. The only way, from my analysing, that the Grand Council could form a Morrowind government in any form is to either have a councillor on each house to effectively force an abstain on any issue, or, which I think is the more likely scenario, you will need to get both councillors on each house of a minimum of 3 to agree with one person's view. And that would form enough majority in the council to basically become the almost like the government, as it were.
Yeah.
And then the other houses would become the opposition. Under the old system, we actually had this sort of majority that was led by Ramus Amaris, Iceli. But obviously with him dead, I honestly cannot call, because we're entering this period and we haven't had this for like a year, this period, where I cannot call or predict who is going to be the next leader of the council. And nor would I want to speculate, because that would feel like I'm playing favourites.
Yeah. So that will be very interesting. And Telvanni contracts will continue representing on the council, of course, right?
Absolutely, through the elected councillor Chiara Telvanni. And I do know, and I think I'll probably have to send out the letters and everything, and they may get this soon. But I know we are inviting, because fair play, they've been good sports and everything, Telnara onto the council. As well. So that will be the 2 Telvanni councillors. Well, obviously with Naris handling Heimlin's affairs. Right. So, it's a good sort of balance in Telvanni at this stage.
Yeah.
And it will be very interesting to see where Telvanni goes from here.
Yeah, the entrance of Telnara on the scene kind of shakes things up for Telvanni, doesn't it? A little bit.
It's interesting with Telnara where they came on the scene with an impact which made Telvanni contracts overreact. And I will openly admit Telvanni contracts basically shut down the power, which is a natural thing in Telvanni to do. You've got a rival. What are you going to do, Iceli? Shut it down.
Yep.
But Telnara has survived. We had a exclusivity contract with the Lalu Exchange, led by the lovely Jolly Moose, which reached its expiry about a month ago, and we've been meaning to renew. But I do know that Telvanni Contracts plans to leave out the exclusivity condition. So it's going to be interesting to see how these two factions sort of cooperate, because they're cooperating really well.
Nice.
But there's been teething problems politically, but they are cooperating.
Interesting. Yes, it'll be very, very interesting to see where it goes from here, because with Telvanni, you know that both sides are plotting and planning behind the scenes.
Oh, yes. That's all I'm saying. Oh, yes.
All right. Well, then, I have one last question for you.
Okay.
If you were a Telvanni master in real life, what would you do to ESO the game?
Well, first of all, I know no Chim, because frankly, Chim are for like peddlers and nobodies. Let's be quite honest for a second. So, though I actually this was one of the questions I was like, what would I change in Elder Scrolls Online? And there were two things I'd change, because I'm greedy. The first one, and it really annoyed me, was Morrowind building variations.
Yeah.
So, like, I would love to go to, say, like, Iliev Temple, and it's sort of like a canton.
Totally. That would be great.
Or I'd love to go to, say, Heimling Keep, and there's, like, these mushrooms pods. Or I'd like to go to Taldaic Fortress and see the Red Ring Crab structures. Or even to Narcissus and see the Lalu houses, and so forth and so forth. Because, I'm sorry, having Heimling Keep as Induril style, it just makes me want to demolish it. Sorry, that's all I'm saying. But the other one, because I'm as people that know me I do a lot of PvP, is I'd love to see an expansion of the Cyrodiil areas. So like you have Leowyn and Anvil.
Yeah.
I would love to see what those are like.
They could almost make those into battleground type areas or little separate PvP zones or something.
Yeah, the only one I was thinking about that would have been a problem would have been DC and EP, and then I thought, hang on a second, we could have a fight over Solitude, guys, come on.
That would be cool. All right, well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was great to hear about all of the darkness that goes on with Telvanni.
Oh, please, we're just in the shallow end.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Space, and I'm sure I will see you on the battlefield that is Ebonheart Pact soon.
Oh, you probably will, in some shape or form.
Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the interview. Be sure to report anything that you think needs to be shared with the community on tinyurl.com/scrollplaynews. Missed the featured character in the character exercise? Worry not, next week is the very first episode of the Scrollplay Character Corner, so keep your eyes open for that too. Next time on Scrollplay, we'll interview Birdsong, the guild leader of Baneful Affair, a criminal guild on the EU EP. Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever roleplayed a Telvanni? Have you ever been intertwined in political intrigue in roleplay? What do you think the best way to spy in roleplay is? Also, if you have any questions that you would like me to ask a Birdsong, post them here and it might happen. Keep roleplaying. Peace.
In all seriousness, no, my teacher is like a no, she like straight roasts people. Like, first day, someone like said something to help her out. She was like, I don't think I asked for her help. I was like, oh, and then I was like, I'm not asking her anything from now on. I don't want to get verbally assaulted.
No. You just need to establish dominance.
I'm gonna be like, this is my classroom.